On the hunt for comfortable, timeless Western boots? You already know the best place to shop for quality boots is at your local Tacova store. So stop by Tacova's Nashville, at the Mall at Green Hills, or on Broadway by Ryman Auditorium. That's right, you now have 2 locations to choose from. Grab a cold one as you shop and get fitted by a pro. Tacova's Nashville is at your service, and you can find your perfectly fitted dream boots with the help of their expert staff. Everyone will be asking where you got your sick new boots, but I won't be asking because I know they must be Tacova's. That's TECOVAS.com. Don't go gently, y'all. Today on CityCast Nashville, we've got a crossover episode about the Eric Mond murder for hire case. CityCast Austin host Nikki Devon is speaking with the host of the Texas Monthly podcast, The Problem with Eric, Katie Vine, about how the well-known Austinite car dealer came to be arrested by the FBI and how all the trouble started right here in Nashville in early 2020. CityCast Nashville is presented by our exclusive launch sponsor, Tacovas. It's August 26th. I'm your host, Grace Fuse, and this is what Nashville and Austin is talking about.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, we are here with Katie Vine. She is a Texas Monthly contributor, and we are going to talk today about the Problem with Eric podcast. First of all, just let me say, obsessed. I'm obsessed. This podcast story, this everything. I am obsessed. I binged it. I'm very excited to talk to you about it. Now, the 6-episode series is all out.
And then there will be some bonus episodes for subscribers.
Now, so the Problem with Eric is about Eric Mond, and it's such an Austin story. Charles Montoya is a huge Austin establishment. Eric Mond is Charles Mond's grandson. So in December of 2021, Eric was arrested by the FBI in Austin in this murder for hire case. How did the people here react?
I mean, shock. His face was in the Statesman and obviously all over the news, you know, the late night news. I know some folks who were friends of his too just couldn't believe it. And I think what contributed to some of that was the actual murders took place just as the COVID lockdown was happening. And so if he had been acting paranoid or unusual in any way, that was the time to be acting unusual because everybody was just locked in the house,
right.
You know, so nobody would have seen any kind of unusual behavior. As you say, the Mond name has been blasted on TV and radio ads for decades in Austin. Eric's grandpa Charles founded the company in 1957 with Charles Mond Oldsmobile Chevrolet. And over the years, it became an Austin empire, right? An Austin institution that grew to include Volkswagen and eventually Toyota. And Eric has a couple of siblings, but he was one of the heirs to the empire. He was worth $40 million.
Wow.
High profile enough that a blackmailer could just Google him and find out he's got some money.
Give us a gist of what happened in this case.
Eric went to Nashville in early 2020 to visit an escort who he'd seen before. Her name was Holly Williams. He knew her as Layla Love. Then in March 1st, 2020, he got a text from a stranger who knew about the night he spent with Holly and wanted money to keep quiet. And Eric panicked. He turned to one of his colleagues at work who put him in touch with a man named Gil Peled. He was kind of known as a badass and somebody who could take care of an extortion situation. He used to boast to his contact at Charles Mond Chevrolet about having taken care of extortion threats for a Russian billionaire and for the Mexican government. He moved to the U.S. in 1999, and then in 2011, he became a bodyguard for Charlie Sheen, where he kind of exaggerated the dangers to Charlie for his benefit.
Yeah. Con man. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And then in 2014, Charlie Sheen fired him. Gil moved to Austin, and the kind of security that he specialized in just wasn't in demand here, obviously. We just don't have enough celebrities. In the spring of 2020, right around the time that Eric is asking him, hey, can you help me with my problem? He was overdrawn on his business bank account. He was facing foreclosure on his home, and he had $11 in the bank. It was a bad combination of he needed the work to escalate, and Eric needed a problem taken care of. So then let me just tell you a little bit about the victims. Holly Williams, whom Eric had slept with in her capacity as an escort in Nashville, was this gregarious Nashvilleian in her early 30s, worked as an esthetician and a high-end escort. In 2018, she fell for a lanky, tall redhead named Bill Lanway. We don't know exactly when Bill found out Holly was an escort, but it was sometime before April 2019, because that's when we see in texts that he was really upset about her work and became violent, and that was starting to escalate. And back in Austin, Eric Mond is a guy who seems like he has it all, right? He's an executive in his family's business, had a wife and kids, a mansion. When he's being blackmailed, the blackmailer was asking for $25,000, and Eric had around $40 million. He could have just paid the money, could have gone to the cops, could have told his wife everything.
That is the biggest question for me.
Yeah, it was the most complicated and the worst option, especially in hindsight. You can, at a certain point, I think, go to the cops or come clean to your spouse.
Why do you think he made that first bad decision to hire a hitman instead of pay the money or come clean to your wife? Mm-hmm. So in total ended up costing him $905,000. It's a lot of money.
You know, he had a prenup, so it wasn't a fear of losing money to his wife, now his ex-wife. The only thing I could think of was that he didn't want to be seen as the sucker to his, friends.
Yeah, ego.
Didn't want to embarrass the family name. I mean, you have a high-profile name. Anyway, he eventually hired Brian Brockway. Then Brian reaches out to Adam Carey, a 29-year-old former Marine who was just really eager for action, who wanted to do some freelance work.
So Gil hires Brian and Adam in March of 2020.
There was no plan for violence in the beginning.
Yeah.
It was just figure out who's extorting Eric and get them to stop with words, right? But the problem was once they got on the ground, they couldn't make contact. Holly and Bill wouldn't answer the door. They wouldn't answer the phone.
They show up at Holly's house and they shoot Holly and Bill and put them in the back of Holly's car, and they go to drive to the dump site. But it turns out that Holly wasn't dead. So they essentially kidnapped her. Once they arrived, they shot her again, and then their bodies were found in Holly's wrecked car the next day.
A lot of their friends thought that it was murder-suicide. Each person had some kind of personal issue that created a perfect storm of motivations, right? There was greed for some, shame for others, and it ends up with two people dead. You have the jealous boyfriend who lashes out at her girlfriend's clients. You have a middleman desperate for cash who sees endless opportunities for money in Eric Mond. He's like an ATM machine. You have a guy who seems to have fantasized about becoming a hitman, Adam Carey, who has a perfect opportunity to live out his fantasies with this scenario. And Eric, a rich guy who wants to keep his secret secret.
Just like a terrible, perfect storm. It is clear that Eric saw himself as invincible and immune to the law. Of course, he probably felt he was above the law. It took a year and a half for him to get caught.
Nobody knew about the arrest, that the arrest was coming, except for folks in the FBI and the Justice Department. In December 7th of 2021, just before, I think it's like 3 days before he's arrested, he writes a Google review and gives Gil's company, Spear Tip, 5 stars.
That Google review.
And says, Spear Tip is very professional, and on top of it, they get the job done in an expedited time. Couldn't imagine using anyone else. I can't imagine the FBI's reaction.
Oh my God.
To seeing that happen, because at that time they were right on top of Eric, just like circling and waiting to arrest him.
Right. Why do you think he was just like, I'm above the law, I'm going to get away with this? Or is it simply that he was just entitled and rich and it was a part of his ego?
I wish I could think of some other explanations, but I can't. I come up blank. I think that's exactly it, Nikki. I can't think of any other reasons.
So I got to know, when and how did you first even hear about the story?
Anna Worrell, a freelance podcast producer, came to us with this story. She's an Austin native and was working in the film world in LA. And her dad kept sending her updates on this case after it broke in the newspapers in 2021. So she became intrigued and brought it to us when she moved back to Austin. And I'm really glad she did. I became the host, and the two of us were introduced in October last year, 2023, just before the murder for trial began in Nashville, where the murders took place. It's in Nashville because it's a federal case, because it involves incidents and defendants in more than one state.
Right.
So yeah, we went to Nashville and attended the 3-week trial with the 3 defendants, Eric Mond, Brian Brockway, and Adam Carey, and took notes in the back of the courtroom so we could learn the details of the case and kind of form the backbone of the podcast.
What was it like? Were there a lot of spectators? Was there a lot of buzz?
Because there were 3 defendants, the jury is on one side of the courtroom, and then lining the whole other side of the courtroom. The defendants were all on the right side, and it was just wall-to-wall attorneys. There was just the one bench for press, and it was us, 2020, and a guy from the Tennessean. Besides the families of the victims and the defendants, that was it.
That's wild.
When we were in Nashville, we interviewed people who knew the victims. When we got back into Texas, we started interviewing people in the car world, trying to figure out people who worked in security, interviewing the prosecutors, and anybody who would talk to us who was involved in this case.
Now, initially, you mentioned that you had a hard time getting friends of the Mond family to talk to you. How did that change, and when did that change?
Well, it never did change. A lot of folks would either talk anonymously, off the record, or in a lot of cases, just not at all. We got a couple of folks to talk to us. One guy who worked with him at the Volkswagen dealership did not have a positive experience working under him.
Yes, I remember him, yeah.
We were able to get in touch with a character named Butch Lundgren, who used to be a car dealer out in Elgin, and he introduced us to a bunch of guys in Austin who are kind of an older generation of hustlers and scrappers who knew Charles Mond.
Yes, I'm so excited we're about to talk about this. So excited.
Yeah, they have this sort of clubhouse in Central Austin behind a gas station.
Yes.
And they had opinions because Eric used to pop in on them every once in a while. He didn't know them really well and vice versa, but they had opinions, yeah.
So tell me about the shithole. So the place that you're talking about, they call it the shithole.
Their words, not ours. Yeah.
Their words, yeah. That was one place where just like having a mic in your hand at all times was really good because they were very, very chatty. They seemed to be kind of a stand-in for the audience.
They're a total riot. I didn't know this place existed like most people. I mean, why would we have known about it? Some people were welcoming. Some people were very alarmed that we were there. They let us come in, and the people who didn't want to talk a lot of times would just leave. But those who stayed oftentimes just let her rip. and had opinions on what he should have done, could have. And they were we thought of them sort of as our Greek chorus. They had just a little bit more experience with Eric and with Eric's world, and so they could kind of translate some of that to us.
And were you surprised at all by their takes on Eric?
I was surprised that a lot of folks felt like he only did it once and he wouldn't do it again, that life in prison was too harsh. I was a little bit surprised by that because it seemed
yes.
To me like the rules are the rules, and murder for hire with murder resulting is a very big deal.
And to your point, I think that several of the people that are involved in this kind of feel like the rules don't apply to them and they can bend at their will.
Eric's not exactly, I wouldn't put him in a con man category, but he seems like the philosophy that he can make the rules definitely would have resonated with him.
They're from Westlake, and people who live here know that Westlake kind of operates by its own rules. It's kind of this like unspoken class conversation sometimes that isn't talked about a lot in Austin. And please, that is not to say that everybody in Westlake is walking around killing people. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying the way that he was dealing with things really spoke to where he comes from. And I mean, do you find that was the case in your opinion?
I think the word entitlement came up more than maybe any other word in the word cloud of interviews. But yeah, I think at the country club, his reputation wasn't so much lazy or vindictive as it was just sort of a little tone deaf. I know one guy told me, who was a member, he said that he asked Eric about the Camry hybrid at the dealership, and Eric said, my dad's butler sure likes it. He kind of meant that as just sort of quite earnestly to say something like that. And the guy just rolled his eyes and thought, okay, that says a lot.
Just completely out of touch. A little out of touch, yeah. Oh my God. So what has the reaction been to the podcast series since being released? I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
I think I'm obsessed because I'm from Austin. And so it feels like like somebody that I know, even though I do not know Eric Bond.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like we're talking about somebody I know. So what has the response been so far?
Yeah. We've heard a lot from people in Austin who say they knew a good chunk of the story, but they didn't know this level of detail. The undercover recordings, actual audio of these guys all telling each other sort of what took place in the murder, giving advice. Maybe you've read the story in the newspaper or read the version that Anna and I wrote for the magazine, or maybe you saw it on TV. But this is it is so much more because you get the undercover FBI investigation and kind of all the phone calls and recorded meetings from that investigation where the hitmen are essentially describing how to get away with murder.
It was like, honestly, it felt like you were in the room.
It's nerve-wracking, right?
It's nerve-wracking.
One of the things that I think shocked us the most in going through this was learning how many opportunities there were for everyone involved to take a different course.
Oh my gosh, so many opportunities.
So many opportunities for them to get off of this Ferris wheel, how many times they could have gotten out of it.
Yeah.
Easily turned the heat down and chose instead to escalate.
It almost reads like a movie because
I know.
Many elements of the story seem really cinematic.
A lot of the text between Holly and Bill became public in the trial, and
yes.
You can see how their relationship was changing and becoming increasingly hostile, coming right up to the date of the murders, where you realize that she was very possibly about to send Bill to jail for domestic violence. And if everybody could have just sat tight for a couple more days,
right,
he might have gone away.
It was taking care of itself.
Everything gone. All problems gone. I guess he could have still had a phone in prison and whatever, harassed people from there, but
that's true.
It would have changed everything.
So 2 months after Bill and Holly were murdered in Nashville, Eric filed for divorce. He withdrew the petition, and in years since, his wife also filed for divorce, and she withdrew her petition, but bottom line is they ended up separating. So you still haven't heard anything from the Mond family?
No, the sentencing will take place. Last time I heard was in December it'll take place. And then maybe after that, I don't know. Usually if folks are going to talk, it would be after sentencing. So in November in Nashville, so Eric was found guilty of murder for hire. Brian and Adam were also found guilty of murder for hire with death resulting. And then Brian and Adam got 2 additional ones because they transported Holly while she was alive from her apartment. So that's a kidnapping charge also. So they got conspiracy to commit kidnapping and kidnapping with death resulting. And each of those counts carries a mandatory life sentence. So they're all appealing.
They're all appealing?
They're all appealing, but if they don't get granted an appeal, then it's mandatory life. So
that's it. This story seems out of control to me. It seems out of control. Mm-hmm. But in honesty, how rare are cases like this?
Murder for hire is pretty rare.
Okay, so I'm not crazy. Like it, or,
No,
like
you're
I'm
not crazy.
I'm not out of line. This is out of control.
Yeah, I know. When I asked the prosecutor Rob McGuire about this, he said, he's been prosecuting cases for decades, and this is his first murder for hire. And Joe Turner, who's one of the shithole regulars, he'd been a prosecutor for a long time too, and he said they were very rare.
Everyone, the podcast is called The Problem with Eric. I felt like I was watching a movie. Katie, thank you so much for being with me.
My pleasure, Nikki. Thank you. Thank you so much.
This has been great. Bye, Katie.
Bye. Thank you.
That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville, but we couldn't have done it without our friends at CityCast Austin, so a big thanks to their team for sharing this story with us. If you have any buddies over in Austin, you should tell them to go give them a follow. And if you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend? Rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye!